Hello everybody and welcome back. My name is Kari and today I am doing my November wrap-up. I read 9 books in November, I had to remember that for a second, which I'm actually okay with. However, if you don't like when people don't hold books up or there isn't a picture, you're not going to like this. Because out of the 9 books, I only own 2 of them. And I'm honestly too lazy to go and find the pictures. Like that's just, it's too much work, it's too much effort, and I don't care that much. So, you have Google, you can look it up if you care that much. However, I will tell you which of the books I liked. Let's start with the 2 I have. First one is The Count of Monte Cristo by Alexandre Dumas, which obviously is a classic, and quite a hefty one. This edition comes in at 1,065 pages. Without, like, footnotes or anything. That is the actual substance of the book, is 1,065 pages in this. This is the ultimate revenge story. We follow a young man named Edmond Dante, who is imprisoned and comes out to take revenge on the people who put him there. There's a lot of twists and turns in this, and it is shocking how much detail is in this book. I really did appreciate it and enjoy it, though. Again, this is a reread for me. I think maybe keeping a list of characters is probably a good idea. It's not War and Peace, right, where you're referring to the family tree every 3 pages because 17 Natalias have popped up. But it is helpful to be able to go, oh, that person. Okay, I remember this person. Otherwise, you know, a page into that description, you're like, oh, that's who we're talking about now. I did that a couple times. Anyway, I still really enjoyed this on reread. I think I gave it 4.5 stars. I might have given it 5. It's a really good book. There are some, no, I gave it 4.5, because there are some problematic elements to it. You know, internalized racism and misogyny. However, it is not nearly as bad as Pillars of the Earth. To be fair, that would be really hard to do. Pillars of the Earth is just a pile of trash. This is not. But yeah, I loved this again. It was fantastic. And I finished that for my book club, which was super fun. And the other one I have is Sea Sparrow by Kristin Cashore, which obviously I love. This is the 5th book in the Graceling series, or the Graceling Realms novels. And we follow Hava in this one, who comes up in Winterkeep and is very important, and we get to see her grow and flourish, really, in this book. I absolutely adored it. I love how Kristin Cashore writes trauma, and childhood trauma in particular. I don't know why or how, but she's really good at it. And particularly the kind of coming to grips with it bit, which is very important. Definitely look up trigger warnings for this, or any of the Graceling series, if we're being honest. They are amazing, glorious, beautiful books, but they are brutal, and pretty much all of them deal with trauma of some type. But I loved this. I loved the setting, which was inspired by her Arctic, North Pole, tour up in Svalbard, Norway. So I thought it was super atmospheric and just beautifully done, and I gave it 5 stars. So the first one was Opium and Absinthe by Ligay Kang. I gave this one 2.5 because it was just dull. Like, there was nothing wrong with it, but there was nothing good about it, you know? It is a murder mystery set in the 1920s, and as opposed to really being a murder mystery, I felt it focused more on the main character's addiction to opium and absinthe. I mean, specifically opium, but she uses absinthe at one point to kind of try and substitute it for opium. Didn't go well. And if I wanted a book about addiction, I would have got a book about addiction. I didn't want a book about addiction. I wanted a fun murder mystery book that's set in the 1920s, so there's, you know, some casual use of absinthe and opium because it's the 1920s in the States. But that's not what I got, and I was very disappointed in it. It was dull. Then I read Snow, a Scientific and Cultural Exploration by Giles Whittle, which I gave 3 stars. This was a nonfiction that kind of talked about snow in various different cultures, in various different locations, stuff like that. I did think this one was really interesting. I wanted more of it, though, which was my problem. It felt like a very superficial exploration of snow. And there's nothing wrong with that, it just wasn't quite what I was looking for. Then I read Stories in Stone by Travels Through Urban Geology by David Williams, which I gave 3.5, going up. This one I did enjoy more, but again, I kind of wanted more of an in-depth explanation of each of these stones and more of a connection between each of them. So the premise of this one, again, nonfiction, is he is a geologist and he moves to Boston with his partner and feels very disconnected because they were in Utah before, where there's tons of rocks out in the open, and then he moved to Boston and there's no rocks. Except he realized that Boston has all of these old buildings built of stone. And he began kind of looking at the building stones of different buildings and cities and tracing them to their origins. So he talks about, you know, this building stone came from this quarry, and this quarry was in use from X to Z time, and, you know, whatever else, which I thought was really cool, because it definitely makes you think about buildings in a different way, particularly the older historic buildings, you know, 100 plus years ago. I think that was really fun and a very interesting way to do it, but like I said, I felt like it needed more of a connection between all of the chapters. Then I read Hemingway, A Life Without Consequences by James R. Mello. This was a chunker of a book. It was 600 pages, and I don't think I can recommend it, if we're being honest. I gave it 3 stars. 1, Hemingway is absolutely an alcoholic misogynist who stuck around trying to nail Picasso's leftovers. Absolutely, hands down, that quote sums it all up. He was a horrible human being. Absolutely god-awful. I think the author did a decent job organizing his life and getting all of it in. However, I think the author put too much detail in, and I think the author also has some problematic elements to him, because in certain things where he would be analyzing it, you could kind of get the sense that, like, oh, he agrees with that, and that's misogynistic. Okay, bad. And I just, 600 pages after that, I went, no, I don't like it. I also I've read Old Man and the Sea by Hemingway, and I didn't love it. I thought it was boring and dull. And if you come into my comments and tell me that it's the iceberg theory of writing, yes, I know. I'm not an idiot. But here's the thing. I don't like the iceberg style of writing. I've gotten a recommendation from one of my friends, of whom Hemingway is their absolute favorite author. And so I will be trying. Oh fuck, what is it? Farewell to Arms? I think so. I'll go check my text messages. The one about World War I. And I will give Hemingway a second chance. If I don't like that book, I'm never reading anything by him ever again. Because he's too shitty of a human being for me to care, 1. And 2, his writing style is not for me. Hemingway, it's like Tolkien is on, you know, the wordiest, most expansive side, along with Sanderson and Robert Jordan. And then there's Hemingway on the complete opposite side of it. And I want somewhere in the middle, you know? I mean, I can lean more towards Tolkien. I really like Tolkien. I don't even mind Sanderson, although I've only read Mistborn and didn't love it, so we'll see how that goes in the future. But Hemingway and I just don't vibe. We will see, though. Then I read Catherine the Queen, The Remarkable Life of Catherine Parr, the Last Wife of Henry VIII by Linda Porter. This one I also gave 3.5 stars. Yeah, go upstairs, Mel. Distracted by dog. Perfectly valid reason to be distracted. Anyway, 3.5 stars, and the reason I gave this one 3.5 stars is because I think it did a good job overall, you know, kind of explaining her life and everything like that. But, the author makes a lot of assumptions and conclusory statements, where she kind of, I don't know, it sounds like she thinks she is Catherine, and she's very clearly not, right? We are 500 years after Catherine died. Almost. So it feels wrong. I didn't love that. I did appreciate all the primary sources she used. I appreciate some analysis of that, you know, this could mean this or could mean that, except that that's not what she did. She went with, oh, here's the primary source, therefore. I'm like, no, not therefore, because things had a different meaning then, society had an entirely different viewpoint than we do now. And you're looking at this from the viewpoint of a 21st century author. So she made a lot of conclusory statements that I didn't like, didn't appreciate, shouldn't be in nonfiction. I wrote 2 books from the person I was pet sitting for. You will see 4 more in my December wrap-up. or will have seen, because December wrap-up's gonna go first. Starting with The Day the World Ended at Little Bighorn, a Lakota History by Joseph Marshall III. This is only about 200 pages, but I gave this 4 stars. It was fantastic. My biggest, well, let's start with what it's actually about, shall we? The Day the World Ended is about Little Bighorn, one of the biggest battles in the Indian Wars here in the States. If I'm not mistaken, Battle of Little Bighorn was in 1871, because then something happened in 1890 and that was the end of it all. But basically, while white people are busy trying to exterminate everybody who doesn't look like them, General George Custer comes in and dies in this battle that the Lakota and the Cheyenne specifically won. And that was huge for them. So this Battle of Little Bighorn, the indigenous peoples win the battle against the white people, and like, shock, right? Because how dare they? It's a whole thing. But he starts and he explains the entire battle to you and who the people fighting in it are, specifically the indigenous populations, because the white people we all know, at least here in the States, because this is part of our history, and we actually learn this part of our history, but at least in the white part of the history, the whitewashing, we sort of learn it as, it was shameful and they shouldn't have won. Moving on, we succeeded in genocide. It's not a great vibe, to be honest. But at any rate, I'm rambling. He starts with the battle where the indigenous people won, and then, you know, talks about why they were all there, who was there, Sitting Bull, Crazy Horse, both part of this, the treaties that came after and were all broken, and what happened in the aftermath of Little Bighorn up until really today. That was the part I liked less. Not because I don't think it's important to know what happened in the 20th century and 21st, but more because it felt like, with the length of the book being about 250 pages, there was a disconnect between the first 2/3 of the book, which was the battle and its more immediate aftermath up until about 1895, and the 20th century. Please don't fall. And I have the context because I've taken several Indian law classes, I've read multiple books, I really adore Indigenous history, not the genocide part of it, but I love learning about it. It's so fascinating and beautiful that I always want to learn more. And so I have the context, but not everybody does, and it felt like it was missing a huge connecting piece from the Battle of Little Bighorn to the residential boarding schools. Again, you can pretty easily make a simple connection, but I wanted more, which is why I got 4 stars. However, I did really enjoy that book, and I will be getting a copy for myself. And then the last book that I read was Indian Horse by Richard Wagamese. Wagamese? I really have got to start looking up names before I do this. Which was a novel about a young boy as he grows, again about 250 pages, Indigenous, and he and his family start out in the woods, way in the back, because they're trying to prevent the kids being taken to the residential boarding schools. Fair enough. It doesn't work out so well, and it's his life and the trauma. Please look up trigger warnings for this one. There are trigger warnings for sexual abuse, parent death, abandonment, substance abuse, to name the top ones. I give this one 3 stars. There is a solid 100 pages out of this book that is just recounting the hockey games that this kid plays. If you like hockey, this is a fantastic book for you. I don't. So I got bored and skimmed 100 pages because I don't care about who makes a goal or what it is you're doing to make your skating better. If I wanted to read that, I would go find a hockey treatise. It's like reading Moby Dick for the plot. You don't do it. You read it because it's a classic, and you should, but God forbid anybody should read Moby Dick anymore. Please don't. Unless you want to learn about whaling in the 19th century, in which case, have at it. But that's kind of the vibe that I got from that one. It does obviously tackles some trauma and some PTSD in there, because he goes to a residential boarding school. And I appreciated the emotions that it can evoke. I didn't like the book itself, which is why I got 3 stars, because I will never read it again. It's probably not going to stick with me for terribly long. But I think it is something that addresses really hard topics in a more natural way, I guess, in the sense of it being fiction. And also, if you really like hockey, this is a fantastic book for you to get into and, you know, start reading some Indigenous authors or start reading about their history without diving into a nonfiction book, which definitely can be denser and possibly harder. I'm not entirely sure how you make residential boarding schools not absolutely horrific. Like, I don't know. But yeah, that was my thought on that one. So, that was a lot more talking than I normally do, I think, for 9 books. But at any rate, those are the books I read in November. Yay! I am somehow, like, just barely on track for my Storygraph/Goodreads reading goal. So, please all the gods that I can read 12 books in December and we will be fine. I will read 150 books this year because I refuse to bring it down and I refuse to fail. It's fine. Anyway, if you've read any of these books, want to read any of these books, have any recommendations based on these books, please leave them down in the comments below, and in the meantime, I will see you in my next video. Bye!